alcohol, and night swimming. It's a winning combination.
Can you believe, Todd, that it's been 50 years since a little film called Jaws was released?
I can't, Chris, in a way. But there's another part of me that's like, well, wait, I was a really little kid. And I think it was a later enough release that I was still a kid. I probably shouldn't have been seeing it. It probably scared the shit out of me. I did see it in the theater.
I was too little to remember this movie coming out. I definitely remember when it premiered on television and watching it. It was a big deal.
First time on television. And now, get ready for Jaws.
I've always been afraid of the ocean, and I'm specifically thinking about sharks when I go into the ocean.
My first memory of Jaws is actually Jaws 2 in a strange way, because it was the summer of '78 and my family took a trip to Southern California and we went to Universal Studios and they had posters of Jaws 2 everywhere. And I just remember the shot of the fin and the tagline just when you thought it was safe to go back into the water. And I just remember it really intrigued me. And then, of course, Bruce the Shark was part of the tram tour at that point, too. We'll get into the pointless money-grabbing sequels later.
And we should say, some people consider this one of the best movies.
I consider Jaws to be the greatest movie of all time.
And you've described it to me before as being a perfect movie.
It is a perfect film.
I have other movies that I've said that about. You've always said that about Jaws. So, to you, what makes a movie perfect?
I think a perfect movie, first and foremost, has to have an airtight screenplay that has a solid 4-act structure, which Jaws definitely has. Written by Carl Gottlieb and partly by Spielberg.
Yeah. Don't forget it was a book.
It was based on a book, but this screenplay in the movie is vastly superior, in my opinion, to the book.
Okay.
Number 2, you've got the world's greatest living director at his most hungry period to prove himself as a feature film director.
Very hungry.
Coming off of TV. Spielberg had a certain verisimilitude that he wanted to convey in this movie, and he definitely captured it.
We'll get to him in a little bit more detail, but I want to at some point talk about his innocence.
Maybe naivete.
I like that. Naivete. That made him not know just how much trouble he was maybe getting into, but how that inadvertently added to how great this movie is. So, all right, what's another aspect of what makes a movie great?
Third, I would say this is perfectly cast. This is one of those movies that I can't imagine anyone else in any of these roles. Not just the main three, but, Lorraine Gary, Murray Hamilton, everybody, even down to like the town people from Martha's Vineyard who were cast as extras. Perfect.
But for the main triad, that rare thing where there's perfect chemistry and balance.
Yeah, kind of similar to the original Star Trek with the Kirk, Spock, and Bones triad, where Kirk was the balance between the other two.
One's more emotional.
Brody is the balance between Hooper and Quinn.
Except in a way, those guys are both emotional.
But that's true.
But anyway, great
in different ways. Yeah.
Great point about casting, though. It is one of the best casts ever. Okay.
And fourth, Jaws had the greatest film composer of all time, John Williams, writing one of his most iconic scores of all time. And by the way, this is also the start of his golden era.
I'd also say that the editing was super tight. Well edited.
By Verna Fields.
With help from Spielberg.
With help from Spielberg, of course, yeah. But,
I could probably point out a few flaws in this film. I'm sure people can. But for the most part, it's a near perfect film. And I've called Raiders of the Lost Ark a perfect adventure film.
Is it a perfect film?
It is pretty damn tight.
And Raiders is another example where Spielberg had to prove himself again.
Very true. I think if you looked it up, is it classified as a horror?
It's got horror elements.
But I'd say this is a great adventure film, and it's a thriller.
It's a thriller. It's an adventure film. It's suspense also.
Suspense.
It's also a drama. That's another reason why I think this is a perfect film, because it doesn't fit neatly into one category.
Where is it categorized if people look it up? You have to throw horror in there.
I think because the plot is centered around an unstoppable monster, most people categorize this as a horror movie.
Well, for its 50th anniversary, there's a few things I want to talk about. And I want to start with, let's get back to the director. When you talk about Spielberg at this point, he quickly made a name for himself enough to be able to get a shot at a TV movie called Duel. And he didn't just deliver, he super delivered.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, there are some parallels to Duel that relate to Jaws. And I want to talk a little bit about that. But
some have said this, Jaws is Duel in the ocean.
The movie Duel did very well for Spielberg, and it gave him his first shot at a theatrical film. And that was actually Sugarland Express. Not a blockbuster.
No.
But it quickly paved the way.
It did well enough, but it wasn't like it wasn't a smash. It didn't put Spielberg on any maps.
It recognized him critically as a director.
And that was his first collaboration with John Williams.
Also, the producers Brown and Zanuck.
Richard Zanuck and David Brown.
And those guys said, this guy's got talent.
Am I remembering correctly that it was in one of their office or one of their offices where he first saw the paperback of Jaws and was intrigued by it?
Spielberg saw it and he said, hey, what's that? They said, yeah, we got the rights to this. Universal's got the rights to it. We're going to, And then he said, hey, it reminds me of the movie Duel.
Being stalked by an unstoppable force.
I get totally why he was into it and he thought he could pull it off. But it helped that Brown and Zanuck, the producers of Sugarland Express, got to see the talent of this guy.
Yeah,
This hungry guy.
Yeah.
This ambitious guy. And back to that point that you mentioned
I think his
earlier.
ambition was pretty well known around Universal at this point. Weren't people in the studio calling him like boy genius around this time?
Steven Spielberg?
This is my lab.
This is your lab.
I'm a boy genius.
I don't think people gave him enough respect. I think until Duel. The bottom line is that Brown Zanuck said, okay, we actually think this kid could do this. I think they had another director in mind, but then the director kept calling the shark a whale. Whoever it was, the director kept annoyingly say, and then he's going after the whale, and it just pissed them off, I think. And so they said, you know what, maybe Spielberg could do this.
And Dick Richards probably would have shot the whole movie on sound stages and in tanks back in LA.
Good point. Yeah. And just like he did for Duel, I think he came up with some pretty daring ideas of how to make Jaws.
Spielberg had to beg the network to let him film Duel completely on the road in Central California. And this is similar. He's like, I want to film this all at sea.
Yeah.
And he was a complete novice on how to go about doing that.
And this goes back to your point about him being hungry, being ambitious. He was young. He was naive. And he really didn't know what he was getting into. And we're going to get into the production in a minute. So you were saying it's a perfect cast.
Yeah.
Who do you want to start with?
I might as well start with Chief Brody himself, Roy Scheider.
Okay. And what did Roy do before Jaws?
He had smaller roles, like he's in The French Connection with the great late Gene Hackman.
That's right.
The 7-Ups, little movies like that.
But French Connection was probably one of the...
That's probably his most... People probably recognized him from that movie.
Then you got Richard Dreyfuss. Now, I know Richard Dreyfuss did two things. He did American Graffiti in 73, I think. And then he did some crappy movie that came out in 74 or 75.
The Apprenticeship of Judy Kravitz.
I have never seen that. I've only heard Richard Dreyfuss talk about it. And Richard Dreyfuss was embarrassed about it.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
I think some people like that movie.
No, Richard Dreyfuss was embarrassed. It could be that it was not critically or at the time that it was released critically or financially successful. And he was worried that he wouldn't get any more work in the town. And so suddenly he was all over Spielberg like, pick me, pick me.
I know Dreyfuss lobbied Spielberg hard for Close Encounters. Did he also do that for Jaws?
He told Spielberg and others he wasn't interested. He saw the reception when he saw him in it. He just didn't think he was very good. And so he then ran back to Spielberg and said, forget what I said.
He thought he was initially too good for Jaws? Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Yeah.
That sounds a lot like Richard Dreyfuss.
He's like, a freaking movie about a shark? No, I don't think so.
Steven, I would so love to be in your little shark movie.
A good thing he did that.
But he's great. He's perfect as,
He's Hooper.
Cutting out the lame subplot of Hooper seducing Ellen Brody probably wouldn't work with Richard Dreyfuss. Yeah. So,
He's totally Hooper. Hooper!
Brings us to
one of the best guys.
One of the greatest film characters of all time.
And I think we should point out right now that we're also drinking a certain beer that the character in this movie, Quint, Narragansett. The dynamics we were talking about with the casting it's just absolutely perfect when you bring Sean to the equation. He's unbalanced. He's sort of obsessed. He does not like Richard Dreyfuss's character. He does not like Hooper.
I don't think Quint likes anybody, to be quite honest.
Yeah, but he had a big problem with the college boy.
Yeah, Quint definitely has that working class chip on his shoulder for sure.
Absolutely.
Because he thinks that Richard Dreyfuss probably feels the same way about him as a city college boy.
Proves that you wealthy college boys don't have the education enough to admit when you're wrong.
I've got pretty much every frame of this tattooed onto my brain.
It is a movie I've seen many a time. The other thing I would say about the cast is for sure the supporting cast with people like Murray Hamilton.
Murray Hamilton is Mayor Vaughn. Perfect, you know.
Maybe a little bit of the stereotypical politician.
A little bit, but
You know.
Murray Hamilton gives him this sort of warmth and likability. You
Yeah.
know? Like, you like this guy, even though he's kind of an asshole.
There are certain famous lines that come to mind in this movie that feature Murray.
You yell barracuda. Everybody says, huh? What? You yell shark. We've got a panic on our hands on the 4th of July.
So the next person I was going to mention was the wife of Brody, Helen,
Ellen, played
Ellen.
by Lorraine Gary, who was Sid Sheinberg's wife.
which is, you know, you can make fun of that a little bit.
A little bit of nepotism there, but, you know,
But
she's
I like
good.
her.
I mean, she's totally believable as this wife/mom whose husband has been beaten down in his job on the New York police force.
He left New York.
And she just wants him to be happy.
Now, I've got, you know, obviously references to all these other, we'll just call them side characters. There's the deputy.
Deputy Hendricks,
Then there's Chrissy herself.
played by Susan Backlindy, who just died, I think, last year.
What's your name again?
Chrissy,
Where are we going?
swimming!
She's the first victim in probably what is one of the most famous first
Probably
victims.
the most iconic opening sequence in any movie.
And here is your horror movie for you folks.
And if you wanted to nitpick and say, oh, here's some stuff that's not perfect in it,
Yeah.
it's clearly day for night that they're shooting, but
It looks
it
great.
looks great.
The other characters that come to mind to me are the kids, who I think the kids in the family, they did a good job.
Yeah, Sean and Michael are really good, well cast.
Especially, is Sean the youngest?
Yeah.
The scene at the dinner table is what I'm thinking of. The other thing I would say is we have to call attention to the little Kittner boy, but his mom.
Lee Fierro, who was I think she ran the local Martha's Vineyard Community Theater at the time.
She has one of the most famous slap scenes in history.
Chief Brody?
Yes?
I have heard or have read that people will seek her out and over the years have sought her out and asked her if they could pay her to slap them in the face while someone films it.
Fans are fucking weird people, man.
But it is a famous slap.
It is a famous slap, but it's also a very dramatic moment in the movie.
It is a real slap.
Basically, Brody's getting slapped because of Mayor Vaughn's bad decisions.
His response to it was great. I'm always impressed with actors or actresses who are sort of brought in from the town. They're like maybe have no acting skill or experience at all, or they have a little bit of local acting experience. But I love that about his early years. I love that he would just find somebody. Oh, you were in Duel. You were like an extra.
Yeah, in Close Encounters, the old couple in the back of the helicopter are also in Duel.
That's right. But the main thing he did was just that feeling of, you know what? Those locals would be perfect for this scene.
Tiger shark.
A what?
Let's get into the production woes because
This was one of the most troubled productions, I think, in all of film.
they didn't have the story finished. They had an unfinished script going into day one of the shoot.
Spielberg and Carl Gottlieb were still working on it while they were shooting in Martha's Vineyard.
They were typing well into the shoot. The other thing that is noteworthy here is the ocean.
He wanted to film on the ocean, just like he wanted to film Duel all on the open road. He wanted to film all the orca and shark scenes completely on the ocean.
And this is the naivete we were talking about. Why did he think that was going to be easy?
Nobody ever filmed in the Atlantic Ocean before.
Was going to be a good idea.
Yeah.
So they ran into everything from, you know, just the waves screwing things up, boats going by in the background.
Which they would have to like then reset the entire scene.
Yeah. The elements are rough. And then
The salt water.
Oh yeah.
decaying
Messing
things.
with the equipment. Yeah.
And what would soon be the unseen star of the movie, Bruce the Shark.
The shark was another layer, and it did not work
To this film's benefit, which, of course, Spielberg discovered in the editing room, or rather the editing Pool House.
Yes. And so maybe one of the most famous things about Jaws is that the shark didn't work
For most of the shoot.
for most of the shoot, but that may be one of the best parts of the film is that you don't get to see the shark most of the time.
Serendipitous.
When you look at Act 1 and Act 2,
You never see the shark.
you don't see it at all, and it was not designed that way. I think in Act 1 you were
Well,
supposed
they
to
were
see the shark.
like when the shark eats Alice Kittner.
Yeah.
They actually had this big rigged sequence where
That's
you
right.
see the shark jump, like lunge out of the water.
would not work.
Grab him, and it wouldn't work.
You see it quite a bit in the third act.
Yeah, but just quick shots. Long shots of the shark underwater is the footage shot by the Australian couple,
That's true. Yeah. They also did
which is a real shark.
They also
Real
did some
great white
underwater
shark.
stuff later after the main principal photography. And Spielberg has talked about this a lot in interviews over the years. You know, he's talked about how this might be something that he learned early on, which is the imagination of the audience.
But he didn't necessarily think that going into the shoot.
The dock scene. It pulls the dock into the water with the guys. You never see the shark, but you see the dock turn around, the part that broke off.
The dock is the shark, and it works so well.
The dock is a shark, and it's one of the best moments of that movie. I think.
Yeah, it's totally suspenseful.
Yeah.
You didn't even know who these guys are either. They just kind of show up briefly.
And who cares? I love that the shark didn't work. I love that the movie in the first act, you're in the eyes of the shark. In the second act, the dock is the shark.
I think the first time we actually see the shark is towards the end of the second act during the 4th of July scene.
Oh, where the guy loses his leg?
Yeah, when the shark is in the pond.
That's another horror film moment for me in this movie.
Well, because you're in the point of view of the shark.
And there are kids involved.
Including Michael Brody.
That is a pretty great, suspenseful, scary scene. The other thing I'll say about the production, because this is pretty famous also, the movie was set for about a 60-day shoot, maybe even like 55 days. It went 165.
Well, way over.
Maybe
schedule and over budget.
Maybe longer. And that's principal photography, which is crazy for this time.
That's why I think if this movie was made today, that Spielberg would have been fired.
But why would he have been fired then? Because the producers were looking out for him. You know?
I think so, yeah. They trusted him.
They saw enough of the dailies. They saw enough of the day-to-day that they were like...
But they had to have seen that in the dailies that the shark wasn't working, right?
They're probably terrified.
Dreyfuss has said in documentaries that at a certain point, he thought the film was going to be a total disaster.
All kinds of problems. So let's get into the story.
Based on the book by Peter Benchley, which was a huge bestseller.
Which you would say...
I read it in high school. I just remember being, not impressed by it.
And you were saying probably the rare case where...
This is one of the rare cases where the movie is much, much better, for sure.
It actually starts out with the opening credits where you're in the eyes of the shark, which is pretty iconic with John Williams' music.
We first hear John Williams' theme.
Takes you to the beach scene with the teenagers, and you get to meet Chrissy!
Chrissy!
Leads to a night swimming scene, and again, one of the most iconic scenes. You'll be scared to go into the water.
Yeah, this is what makes you scared of the ocean.
Perfectly crafted, perfectly executed scene.
Yeah, she was on harnesses that were pulling her in two different directions. And in one of the documentaries, she talked about how it messed up her back.
That's a great, great intro, by the way, to this movie.
So we're immediately introduced then to Chief Brody and his family, and we find out that he's a little depressed. He was on the New York City Police Force, and something that we actually know what really happened, but something occurred in his job that he had some sort of breakdown. And he accepted this job as chief of police on Amity Island.
Amity, as you know, means friendship.
Another great Murray Hamilton line.
So here he is, chief of police, small town of Amity. Basically, that leads to...
Brody gets called in, and they find her body
part of her body.
Washed up on the shore.
And then he's freaking out. He's running around town. It also was filmed, I believe, at a time when they were actually doing some sort of parade.
Actual real life activity going on in the town, which adds to the realism of it.
And that was filmed a few months before the summer.
Summer of 74, right?
I think they started filming in March or April.
Oh, okay.
And so it's not quite...
Oh, and some of the trees are still dead?
Remember, they wanted to be done before the summer craziness.
And didn't it go all the way into
It went to
August?
September. It went to August. But they were trying to get out of there way before July 4th, which is why they started in April. So the early scenes, you can tell if you pay attention, it's not
Dead
summer.
trees.
Yeah.
So we next see Brody going through the town, and the people are all played by locals. You just get to see like the day-to-day workings of this town, like the old man who owns one of the shops, and the Boy Scouts.
Karate chopping fences.
Yeah. This is the only stress that he has in his life right now. He's gone from the dirty streets of New York to a town where the only thing he has to worry about are unruly kids and crotchety old store owners.
Great scene that kind of establishes the town. You've established the girl being killed.
And we've established the Brody family.
Get to work on those signs. Beach is closed. No swimming. By order of the Amity PD. Let Polly do the printing.
What's the matter with my thing?
Let Polly do the printing.
Being a sensible chief of police, Martin Brody wants to close the beaches, which immediately sets alarms off in the town's mayor, Mayor Vaughn.
We're really a little anxious that you're rushing into something serious here. It's your first summer, you know.
What does that mean?
I'm only trying to say that Amity is a summer town. We need summer dollars.
Great intro to his character.
Summer dollars, that's a great line.
Yeah, I mean, that's
Summer dollars.
Summer dollars, man. They bring in those tourists for the summer in Amity, and it is huge.
That's how the town survives.
Yeah. Big deal. Big deal to say the beaches are going to be closed.
I mean, to be fair, it is his job as the mayor to be focused on the town's economy.
The guy said it was a boating act, that it was maybe a shark attack, but then the mayor gets him to change his tune.
Yeah, the coroner changes his prognosis.
Yeah, it was a boating accident, probably.
Yeah.
So bottom line is the beaches are open. Bad idea. And again, another iconic moment in this film.
Alex Kintner, they're beginning to prune.
Just let me go out a little longer.
Just 10 more minutes.
Thanks.
The dog's playing with the stick. He goes out, with the yellow raft, famous yellow raft scene. But the one person who is uptight is Roy Scheider.
Is Martin Brody. And one thing that Mayor Vaughn says, and Ellen also reinforces, that maybe Brody's just feeling, leftover PTSD from his trauma on the police force.
This is a great buildup. One of the great buildups, because you've got this great sequence where people keep walking by the line of sight of Scheider watching the water, watching the people swimming in the ocean. And you just keep seeing people. And every time a person passes the camera,
that's a cut.
It's a cut. And they switch back to Roy's face. And then they switch back to the ocean. I mean, it's very tense. Very well shot. You also had this great famous scene of the shark where you're the eyes of the shark going towards
Seeing,
Alex Kintner's
little boy legs, kicking in the water, yeah.
And then a pretty freaking horrific death.
Which leads to one of the most famous film shots, I would say, of all time.
The zoom dolly.
The zoom dolly.
Chaos, panic ensues.
Did the shark eat Pippin the dog too? We never find out what happened to Pippin.
Pippin!
So the shark ate Pippin and little Alex Kintner all in one go.
Yeah.
Does the shark just have a massive eating disorder?
He was hungry.
I mean, this is why we fear sharks, because they're just nonstop eating machines, which this movie definitely reinforces.
What we are dealing with here is a perfect engine, an eating machine.
After the sadness of that situation, the whole town is out for blood.
People are angry.
So you see the town hall meeting.
Mrs. Kintner is now offering a bounty for anyone who kills the shark.
Yes. Reward for the shark, and some guy says, will the reward for that shark be cash or check?
Everybody laughs.
Except...
I don't think that's funny at all. I'm sorry.
Who is that?
She's just another local Martha's Vineyard lady.
She's awesome.
She owns one of the motels on the island.
And you meet one of the best characters.
One of the great intros to a character, too.
Yeah. Great intro. He delivers one of the best monologues in movies.
We'll get to that.
No, this is it.
He has another monologue much later in the film.
But you're right. I mean, you bring up something good here. This guy has not one, but two great monologues.
I'll find him for 3, but I'll catch him and kill him for 10. You gotta make up your minds. You wanna stay alive and ante up? You wanna play it cheap? Be on welfare the whole winter. $10,000 for me by myself. For that you get the head, the tail, the whole damn thing.
Everybody knows he's crazy,
Yeah.
but he's crazy enough to probably catch the shark.
Thank you, Mr. Quint. We'll take it under advisement. They're
He's
still
humoring him.
Yeah. And so you still have what leads to the big everybody trying to go catch the shark.
People from all over the region are coming in to and it's just mass chaos.
Mrs. Kidner must have put her hat in Field and Stream.
It's more like the National Enquirer.
And this is where we're introduced to Hooper, Matt Hooper, played by Richard Dreyfuss.
From a marine biologist.
Can you tell me if there's a good restaurant or hotel on the island?
You walk straight ahead.
They're all gonna die.
Brody called him in because he distrusted the coroner's change in his prognosis of the death of Chrissy.
You see him interacting with some of the locals. Again, some
Perfect.
great locals.
Some great.
There's a scene where he meets the guy that Quint is based on.
Hello.
Hello, Beck. Young fella, how are you?
Craig Kingsbury, who plays Ben Gardner. And Ben Gardner will pop up again later on. You got people throwing sticks of dynamite into the water. It's just total MAGA chaos.
Where does that lead?
They do catch a shark.
Yeah.
It's a big shark, but it's not the shark.
It's a tiger shark.
A what? Hooper instantly assesses that this is not the shark. Brody wants it to be the shark.
Hang on. Before they get into that, though, there's the famous slap scene.
Yes, Alex Kittner's mom comes up. She's wearing black. They've clearly just had the funeral.
Very big deal.
I just found out that a girl got killed here last week. And you knew it.
And that does...
Who doesn't deserve it?
It does not deserve it at all. He's the one guy that's actually given a crap.
Yeah.
But she doesn't necessarily know that.
She doesn't know that.
It leads to the kind of a down tone of the
that
movie.
That sends him into a downward spiral.
A depression.
So that leads to the dinner scene, which is,
at the dinner table.
pure unadulterated Spielberg at its best. Hooper comes over, brings over a bottle of wine, and I think in the book, this is where he hooks up with Ellen.
Stupid.
Yeah.
So the next thing is, I don't think it's the shark.
Yeah.
He's telling that to Brody, so they go check out the shark that they did catch.
Yeah.
That's it.
Gotta close the beach, call the mayor.
Got a bigger problem than that, Morton. You still got a hell of a fish out there. With a mouth about this big.
The duo first proved that the Kittner boy was not eaten by that shark.
Yeah.
Then they're out on the water, drunk. But great night scene. Pretty scary.
I remember as a kid when I saw this, that whole sequence scared me.
And
it's just all pitch black.
And Dreyfuss is saying, good idea for me to go scuba diving at night with the killer shark.
Which I would never do.
Which no one would do. But it adds to the tension.
And this leads to what might be one of the first instances of a jump scare, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. Which was done in post-production.
This was done in post-production.
Ben Gardner.
It's Ben Gardner. Did Spielberg create the jump scare?
Yeah, but it was a good vibe, a good feeling he had.
Because they had a test screening at some place months before, and he was there's something I could do here to up the tension.
He was right.
And I've seen newsreel footage of people in the audience totally reacting to it like Spielberg wanted.
So they're basically done filming, but they're editing.
Yeah. And as all Jaws nerds know, it was filmed in Furnifield's swimming pool.
The editor.
The editor of the film.
He drops the tooth. That would have been some evidence.
Proof.
And then there's a great scene where they're telling the mayor, dude, this shark is still out there. Close the beaches. 4th of July. But crowds are coming.
Asshole teenagers have defaced the Amity, welcome to Amity sign.
That's it. Goodbye. I'm not going to waste my time arguing with a man who's lining up to be a hot lunch.
That's all that Mayor Vaughn cares about at this point. He's
right.
Pissed off about the graffiti vandalism to the sign.
Right. And
I want them hung up by their Buster Browns.
That's right.
Like Quint later on, Mayor Vaughn does not trust this college-educated guy. He thinks he's just here to advance his career.
Now, why don't you take a long, close look at this sign? Those proportions are correct.
Love to prove that, wouldn't you? Get your name into the National Geographic.
So many good lines.
His attire, his
great.
suits.
It's great.
I mean, he's got this weird, it looks like a bathroom shower mat that's a suit jacket at one point.
So good.
The beaches are open, and the people are having a wonderful time. Amity, as you know, means friendship.
So basically, this is the point in the movie where 4th of July crowd is arriving, which is terrifying Brody. And
I'm not sure if that's a really believable part. I mean, if I heard about shark attacks in a town, I would not go there on vacation.
And you're right. There is some news stories going on because Peter Benchley does his cameo.
Yeah, Peter Benchley's there as a news reporter.
So that
there is
does-
news.
Cloud in the shape of a killer shark.
Because the media's there, the mayor's concerned because no one's going in the water.
And I love how the first people go in and then everyone's like, woohoo! They all start swimming, splashing, craziness, tension.
Spielberg knows how to build tension, just like Hitchcock did.
Brody is, by the way, not only just terrified because of the situation.
He's hired like more deputies.
He's got
for this.
Yeah, he's got more deputies.
And they have like more like lifeguards around too.
Yeah, great scene. There's a fin.
He made me do it. He told me to do it.
I love the scene because that's the distraction.
That's the distraction. That's the look over here.
And then you see
the
real shark entering the
pond, which is the estuary off the side of the main beach.
Shark! The shark!
Yeah, the most tepid shark yell. Like, is she scared that people will judge her if she's wrong for yelling shark?
And then that
shark.
But I love it. I love it. I love that he walks over, but then
Michael's in the pond.
And this is, I think, like I said, this is where you first see the shark.
Little Sean is on the side, just by the beach.
But Michael's on a boat with some friends.
Yeah, and there's a
little like dinghy.
There's another local guy going, "What are you guys doing over there?"
Was that a pickup shot of the leg?
I don't even know.
That might have been in
Don't even
Field's
know.
swimming pool too.
I don't even know. It's terrifying. You see the kids are panicked. Michael's in shock.
The shark glides by Michael.
Great scene. Everyone's freaking out. The wife thinks he's dead. He's like, no, he's in shock. And terrifying. And then a great scene in the hospital follows.
Yeah, this is where like Mayor Vaughn isn't some cartoonish villain, and he has some depth, and he's been really affected by everything that's happened.
My kids were on that beach too.
Basically, from there, it's time to go to the third act of the movie, and it's time that we finally say, let's pay Quint.
Yeah, that leads to what I think what most people think the movie is. The third act.
Really? Because I would think most people think it's the shark killing people in the small town and the horror of that. Whereas the third act becomes more of an adventure movie.
Yeah, and the music, John Williams brilliantly changes the music too.
The tone is no longer the dun. It's mostly
it's kind of like high seas adventure.
This lift.
Which I love that thing.
Also, these great dynamics, right? With this
So
great.
yeah, it's just the three of them. Martin Brody, Matt Hooper, and Quint on the boat.
The great triad.
Quint's boat.
You got city hands, Mr. Hooper. Been counting money all your life.
All right. Hey, I don't need this. I don't need this working class hero crap.
You're not going to do this aboard the ship, are you, Mr. Quinn?
This might be a good time to mention that Brody's character hates water.
Yeah, we actually haven't mentioned that.
Yeah,
Right.
he is afraid of drowning. He's afraid of water. He never goes in the water.
So naturally they moved to an island, which I think Dreyfus says at one point.
So of course,
sarcastically.
Orca, famous boat in this movie, and they go on a hunt.
You could argue that the Orca is the Millennium Falcon of boats in this world. A hunk of junk.
That's a good point. Never thought of that. They're hooking a bait.
Throwing out chum. Hooper brought on these tanks.
That's right, the tanks.
This is compressed air.
Well, what the hell kind of a knot was that?
You pulled the wrong one. You screw around with these tanks and they're gonna blow up.
Foreshadowing. This leads to another iconic scene.
I can go slow ahead. Come on down and chum some of this shit.
Luckily, the shark worked.
Now, one of the rare instances where the shark worked. I think you only see the head like a few. And I've heard people say that, oh, the shark looks so fake in that shot. I'm like,
I think it actually looks pretty good.
I think it looks good. For 1975?
I think it looks really good.
I mean, it looks amazing. Great reveal. Which also leads to one of the all-time greatest cinema lines.
You're going to need a bigger boat.
And I love how that takes you to also one of the best shots of the movie, I think. It's this perfect shot of the mechanical shark where you see the whole thing.
Yeah.
And I love...
I mean, like, when the shark worked, it looked great.
That's a 20-footer.
25. 3 tons on them.
There's some great character stuff here. The tension between the adversarial nature of Quint versus Hooper. And it leads to
Quint and Hooper are trying to like one up each other constantly.
Which I love. You get to the kind of a midway point of the adventure, the third act, where they've dealt with the shark a little bit. It's still out there. The great barrel sequences, by the way. There's so many great barrel sequences in this part. Partly because the shark probably wasn't working.
The shark wasn't working. So they had to have the barrels stand in for the shark.
But it was such a good idea.
But it's a good idea. Yeah. John Williams' music helps sells it too.
And this leads to a good middle point of the third act where they're in
a lull.
They're chilling.
Yeah.
It's nighttime.
They're tracking now the shark with the barrels.
And they're drinking.
They're getting drunk on the Orca, which I don't think I would do with Quint.
I would have been too nervous. But it's calm. They're drinking and they're bonding, these three characters.
Yeah.
We're talking about the scars that they've had, Hooper and Quint, which I love.
Which leads to Quint's next great monologue. Maybe the best monologue in any film.
You know the thing about a shark? He's got lifeless eyes, black eyes, like a doll's eyes. When he comes at you, he doesn't seem to be living until he bites you. And those black eyes roll over white, and then... oh, then you hear that terrible high-pitched screaming.
Robert Shaw was a playwright, too, and he also helped write the dialogue for this.
What's great about the writing of this monologue is that it started out with Gottlieb.
And I think John Milius had a stab at it, too.
And they worked on it a lot. But it was actually...
But they gave it to Shaw.
Robert Shaw took what was like 7 pages and put it into like 3 or 4.
And he was drunk during the filming of it. We should probably mention that, for those that don't know, Robert Shaw was an alcoholic.
He drank a lot.
They had to do it many, many times because it was all one take.
He was embarrassed about his drunkenness, and he wanted to do a more professional job, and so he shaped up the next day and got a lot done.
He nailed it.
Yeah.
Like I said,
he had a drinking problem.
He had a drinking problem. This is like...
And I say that while I'm drinking. So
I think you could definitely say that this monologue is Shakespearean.
So good. Something interrupts them, and it is the shark.
I think Spielberg has mentioned that in one of the documentaries too. Like, as an animal, I don't think sharks really behave this way, but for the purposes of the story, it's perfect.
He's always been good at that.
Yeah.
He's always good about suspension of disbelief, but at the right proportions. And then I think you get into one of the best climactic crescendos of an adventure horror movie
for sure,
ever. The other thing I would say is that you're seeing some of the best direction of Spielberg in this moment.
Yeah.
This last half of the third act, the tension, the quick shots, like the one through the glass. I love that it leads to Quint kind of freaking out at one point going after the shark. He's doing full throttle.
He's kind of lost it.
He's totally lost it.
He's still probably drunk.
Brody tries to call for help. There's the great smashing of the radio.
Excuse me, Chief.
The engine shot. They're slowly sinking.
Thanks to Quint.
And he's handing them like freaking life vests at this point. It is grim.
Quint pretty much defers to Hooper and all of his college boy equipment at this point because he knows that he fucked them up.
You get this little needle through his skin?
No, I can't do that. But if I can get him close enough to this cage, I think I could get him in the mouth or beyond.
Shark will rip that cage. You got any better suggestions?
And so they immediately start building the cage.
Basically their only option at this point. So he goes down to the cage.
He's the cage guy.
Yeah. Which also is not Richard Dreyfuss.
In the close-ups.
Filmed again in, well, it's 2 different shots.
3 different shots.
3.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's filmed by the Australian couple in Australia.
Actual shark footage.
With actual shark footage and some other person in the cage. Post-production, it's in Verna Field's swimming pool. You see like the close-up of Hooper's eyes seeing the shark. That's not Richard Dreyfuss.
Well, midget was actually used at the...
Yeah, to make it look the shark that much bigger.
Yeah. But it's
you mean a little person.
A little person, sorry. Did I say midget?
Yes.
Well, wait, but they used to be called midgets.
In 75, they were called that, yes.
Oh, see? All right.
But 75, they also did a lot of questionable things that we don't do now.
But how great is it that they're intercutting with footage, principal photography on the boat, to post-production with the guy who's doubling.
Shark footage shot
in
Australia, like before, I think, main production.
Yes, absolutely true. Yeah. So pretty great editing, bringing it all together. That suspenseful scene with the shark, he's watching it, and the shark's sort of swimming away.
And it goes into the darkness of the water.
Yeah, it's gone. And the music gets
John,
quieter.
John Williams, genius.
Yeah, love it. Music gets quieter. And then suddenly...
Again, I'm not sure that's how sharks think, or...
It doesn't matter.
But it doesn't matter.
So good.
Spielberg's right. It works in the film.
It was so good. Great sequence. He loses the poison dart weapon.
The spear.
The shark destroys the cage. Very suspenseful.
Completely thrashed. It's a great shot that the Australians shot of like the shark just thrashing the cage.
So good. They
think he's dead. It's this silent moment between them where they just look at each other and they're like, they have no idea what they're going to do next. And then the shark attacks. If there's one bad note in the film, it's like a wide shot and the mechanical shark's completely up on the boat.
It goes too far out of the water.
It's too far out of the water, yeah.
Yeah. I know exactly what you're talking about. It always struck me as kind of over the top, but suspension of disbelief kind of thing. I was just like, I accept it.
I mean, the movie has totally earned that one little moment of suspension of disbelief.
That leads to probably one of the best death scenes.
Yeah. Again, with Robert Shaw.
And I should say horrific death scenes. It's pretty over the top.
I watched this as an older man. I'm like, I feel bad that Quint dies here. Like when I was a teenager and a kid, I was like, I didn't think about it. But now I'm like, especially after the great Indianapolis scene, I'm like, that's such a horrible way for him to go.
It's pretty terrible after the Indianapolis story that he gets munched on by a shark.
And that is Robert Shaw in the mechanical shark's mouth, by the way.
Acting.
Going underwater.
He went for it, man.
That's intense.
So Quint's gone. And this leads to I keep saying this, but another great moment in film history. And this is a combination of John Williams' music, great editing.
And we should remind everyone that the shark's demise was set up at the beginning of the third act.
You screw around with these tanks and they're gonna blow up.
It's a perfect example of setup and payoff.
And again, I love this ending, the build-up.
The boat is sinking fast and Hooper's equipment is like strewn about everywhere.
He does break into the hull of the ship.
Yeah.
And he hits him with the tank.
Shoves it in his mouth.
He's climbing up the tower of the ship, which is sinking.
Which is the only part of the ship that's above water.
Gets a little height, but not a lot.
Yeah.
Shot 1, shot 2, shot 3. You see the bullets whizzing by in the water, whizzing by the shark.
Yeah.
You see that great intercut of the shark kind of munching on
the tank. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you see like bits of flesh.
Yeah.
Like
that's Quint.
That's Quint's flesh.
Maybe a little bit of the Kittner boy in the back molars.
No, he's already digested and shat out the Kittner boy.
He already shat out the Kittner boy. So enough of the shark defecation. Let's just get back to the main plot here.
But
finally,
it leads to the great final line of the film,
which is,
Fire, you son of a...
It's as good as like Death Star blowing up.
It's the exact same euphoric release for the audience.
Great music.
Clips of audience reaction and people were cheering in 1975.
By the way, we should point out that Duel, they actually took a sound effect at the end of the movie Duel, Spielberg did, and put the same sound effect as the shark.
Bloody and descending into the ocean, which I don't know, that doesn't make sense either.
Doesn't matter.
It's a great shot.
It's perfect marriage of that great music by John Williams, great shot of the bloody carcass, and then the sound effect in Duel, and great callback. And that's it, folks. And then that leads to, of course, guess who's not dead? Hooper's not dead. Great reveal there.
They use 2 of the barrels to swim back to shore.
Yeah.
I used to hate the water.
I can't imagine why.
I love it.
Great.
And I love that that's the ending credits immediately.
I love John Wayne's music then that kicks in there.
I love that you see him swimming. I love that you actually see the shoreline and you actually see them coming up the shore as the ending credits.
You see them actually walk into the shore.
Yeah. It's so good.
Again, a perfect film.
I agree. You've convinced me. At first, I went into this going, is it a perfect movie? It is. This was the first blockbuster.
This created the summer blockbuster, for good or bad.
How about this? This was the first true great film as a blockbuster.
All blockbusters strive to be as great as this film.
Yeah. I like that. I like that a lot. What is the full global
haul?
Yeah.
$267 million. In 1975 money, too.
That's a lot.
That's a lot.
By adjusting it for inflation, it's probably like over $1 billion.
It's over $1 billion. Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about what became pretty infamous in the movie industry, and that is the sequels. There were sequels before Jaws.
Yeah, Planet of the Apes, you know.
Well, Godfather 2.
Godfather. Yeah, that's not necessarily like a franchise sort of like.
Well, I'm not saying it is. I'm saying that this took it to another level.
Jaws 2 might be the first 2 sequel. And by that I mean not part 2, but numeral 2.
You're basically talking about Jaws 1 and 2, but then Jaws 3D. Don't forget about 3D, folks.
Yeah, nobody cared about 3D in 1983.
And don't forget about Jaws 4, folks. Where
one of the worst films of all time.
The offspring of Jaws tries to haunt and track down the family.
The Brody family.
Of the Brody family.
Scheider had the good sense to stay away from Jaws the Revenge.
They're both bad.
Jaws 2 is bad too. I mean, they're all bad. There's a reason why there hasn't been a sequel to Jaws since 1987. Because this franchise, it's not a franchise. It's a one-off film. And then like the studio tried to milk it for at least 15 years.
Of course they did. Now, the other thing to talk about with the success of Jaws, for the first time really, is merch. There were t-shirts that sold very well.
There were pinball games and beach towels that you could lie on instead of going into the water.
There were all kinds of merchandise. That was a new thing. That was part of the blockbuster vibe. Why was Jaws able to have merchandise and then Lucas swept in and capitalized on merchandise without the studio going, wait a minute, we just saw what happened with Jaws.
Yeah.
How smart was that guy to go, you know what?
Lucas is a better businessman than a director.
I agree.
A filmmaker.
He's definitely a better businessman than a director. It is, I'm sure, in the Library of Congress as...
Of course it is, yeah. It is, yeah.
There's a following for sure.
Because it's one of the greatest films of all time.
I think it's one of the greatest films of all time.
What do you think is better than this film?
I'm not getting into that right now.
Well, tell me what you think is better than this film.
I can't. This is about Jaws. I
Are
don't
you
want
gonna
to get
say-
into it, but I don't want to start debating like all the movies that we think are great.
Are you going to say Close Encounters is better than this film?
Maybe.
But why don't you say that?
Turkey!
Close Encounters is better.
All right. Still directed by Spielberg.
Come on, Chief. This isn't no Boy Scout picnic.
Well, just like little Alex Kittner was eaten by a shark, we've eaten too much of your time.
I don't think that's funny. I don't think that's funny at all.
You yell barracuda. Everyone says, huh? What? You yell shark. We got a panic on our hands on the 4th of July.
That's some bad hat, Harry.
We're going to need a bigger boat.
With this hook and this hunk of chocolate, I'll land your boy, and I'll clean him for free.